So,
Yeah. Well, Prince William gave a rare interview to UK radio show Heart Breakfast, where he talked about a ton of stuff. I mean, I really felt like we got so much new information out of him.
He wasn't supposed to say it. No one in that room expected it. Not the documentary crew. Not the interviewer sitting across from him with carefully prepared questions on a clipboard. Not even the palace aides standing just off camera who had spent weeks orchestrating every single detail of that sit-down. Nobody. And yet, in one unscripted, unplanned, breathtaking moment, Prince William, the future King of England, the man trained since birth to absorb pain without flinching, looked directly into that camera and said what 6 years of silence had been holding back. The internet didn't just react. It detonated. Within hours of the clip leaking online, before the documentary had even officially aired, the footage had been shared across every platform, dissected in every language, and replayed by millions of people who could not quite believe what they were watching. Royal commentators who had spent decades covering the Windsor family scrambled for words. Journalists who thought they had seen everything went quiet. Because what William said in that moment wasn't just surprising. It was, by every measure, the most raw, the most honest, and the most devastating thing a senior royal had uttered in modern history. He called it what it was. No diplomatic language. No carefully worded palace statement drafted by a communications team. No measured, rehearsed non-answer designed to say everything while revealing nothing. Just a man. A husband, a future king, sitting in a chair, voice cracking at the edges, finally refusing to stay silent. He said his family had been made into collateral damage in a transatlantic PR campaign, and he wasn't going to allow it anymore. Those words, that phrase, collateral damage in a transatlantic PR campaign, they didn't sound like something William had planned to say. They sounded like something that had been sitting inside his chest for years, building pressure the way water builds behind a dam, until the dam simply could not hold another drop. And in that documentary chair, under those studio lights, with a camera rolling that he perhaps momentarily forgot was there, it gave way. The clip spread faster than anything the royal family had generated in years. Faster than the coronation footage. Faster than Catherine's cancer announcement. Faster than the Oprah interview that started all of this. Within 48 hours, the phrase collateral damage had become the most searched royal term on the internet. Late-night television referenced it. Political commentators referenced it. Even people who had never paid a single moment of attention to the British monarchy found themselves watching that clip on their phones, leaning forward, feeling something shift. Because this wasn't performance. That was the thing people kept saying over and over again in comment sections, in group chats, in living rooms across the world. This was real. Hi viewers, here is a simple question for you. When you watched William in that moment, did you feel like he was right to finally speak? Or do you think he should have stayed silent? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Because the answer to that question matters more than it might seem. And by the end of the story, you may find yourself changing your answer entirely. To understand why this moment hit the world the way it did, you have to understand what came before it. You have to understand the silence. Not the comfortable silence of a man with nothing to say. The grinding, costly, suffocating silence of a man who had everything to say and chose, day after day, year after year, to say none of it. While Harry stood in front of Oprah Winfrey and delivered accusations that rippled through every headline on earth, William said nothing. While a Netflix documentary reconstructed hallway conversations and painted the palace as a cold, indifferent institution, William said nothing. While Spare landed on bookshelves with physical altercation claims, jabs about his hairline, and allegations so personal they made people wince just reading the summaries, William said nothing. He showed up. He smiled. He shook hands. He cut ribbons. He performed the duty with the precision of a man who had been trained for exactly this kind of endurance. But the body never lies. Anyone watching closely during those years could see it. The way his movements had become smaller, more contained, almost mechanical. The way his jaw stayed tight even when his mouth curved into a smile. The way his eyes, in unguarded flashes between the handshakes and the photo calls, carried something heavy. Something unresolved. Something that had nowhere to go. And then one day it did. There is a specific kind of silence that has nothing to do with quiet. It is not the silence of peace. It is not the silence of someone who has nothing to say. It is the silence of a person who has made a calculated, agonizing decision to absorb blow after blow after blow without ever letting the world see them stumble. It is the silence that costs something. The kind that leaves marks on the inside that nobody ever gets to see. That was William's silence. And it lasted 6 years. To truly understand the weight of what broke open in that documentary chair, you have to go back. All the way back to the moment the ground first shifted beneath the Windsor family. Because this story did not begin with a leaked clip. It did not begin with a viral moment or a single devastating sentence delivered to a documentary camera. It began with a slow, relentless dismantling. Piece by piece. Grenade by grenade. And William stood in the middle of it all, suit pressed, shoulders back, jaw set, and said nothing. March 2021. Oprah Winfrey. A garden in California. The world watched as Harry and Meghan sat across from the most famous interviewer on the planet and delivered accusations that landed like a wrecking ball against the palace walls. There were claims of racism within the royal family. Claims that cries for help had been ignored. Claims that the institution had failed them so completely, so coldly, that leaving was the only option left. The headlines were immediate. The damage was global. And somewhere in London, a man who had grown up alongside his brother, who had shared a childhood defined by unimaginable public loss, watched it all unfold. William said nothing. Then came the Netflix documentary. A multi-part series that gave Harry and Meghan an enormous global platform to reconstruct events, revisit grievances, and present their version of life inside the royal family. There were recreated moments. Loaded silences, carefully chosen footage placed against even more carefully chosen music designed to tell a very specific story. The palace was painted as cold, indifferent, a machine that chewed people up. And once again, William's name was woven through it all. Not always directly, but always present, like a shadow just at the edge of every frame. William said nothing. Then Spare arrived. The book, the memoir that Harry released in January 2023, and that detonated across the literary world with the force of something nobody in the palace had fully prepared for. There were claims of a physical altercation between the brothers. There were comments about William's appearance, about his hairline, delivered with a casual cruelty that made readers stop mid-sentence. There were allegations about Kate. About conversations so private, so intimate, that the very act of putting them on a page felt like a violation of something that should have been untouchable. And still, William said nothing. Here is what people forget when they marvel at that silence. Every single one of those moments, every interview, every documentary segment, every leaked chapter, had to be experienced by William in real time, not in the comfortable distance of a news headline. In real time, he had to wake up to them the way the rest of the world woke up to them, except the rest of the world got to be outraged on his behalf and then move on with their mourning. He did not get to move on. He had to walk out of his front door, straighten his tie, and represent an institution that was being dismantled in public while he stood there and smiled. Think about what that does to a person. And then add this. In the middle of all of it, woven through every one of those years of public attacks and private humiliations, the woman he loved was quietly, privately fighting for her life. Catherine's cancer diagnosis did not come out of nowhere, but to the public it felt that way. A short video, composed face, a statement that carried more weight than almost anything the royal family had communicated in years. And just like that, the man who was already carrying the accumulated grief of 6 years of family fracture was now carrying something else entirely. Something far more personal, far more terrifying. The fear that the person who anchored his world might not stay in it. That fear does not leave quietly. It does not clock out at the end of the day. It follows a person into every room they enter. It sits behind every smile they perform. It waits for them in the silence at the end of every public engagement when the cameras finally stop and there is nothing left to do but feel the full weight of everything they have been holding. Watch the footage from that period. Watch the way William moved through public appearances in 2024. The body language tells a story that his words never would. His movements were smaller, contained. Almost as if he was afraid that too large a gesture might crack something open that he was working very hard to keep sealed. His chin dipped lower than usual when he spoke about anything remotely personal. His laughs, though present, had a quality to them that felt slightly removed, like a man performing normalcy because the alternative was something he could not afford to show the world. This was a man under a pressure that had no visible release valve. Until the documentary, until the chair, the camera, the question about Kate, and then the dam broke. The scene inside that documentary was not supposed to go the way it went. The interview had been arranged with the kind of careful precision that surrounds every official royal engagement. Questions had been discussed in advance. Not scripted answers but agreed territory. Safe ground. The kind of structured conversation that allows a senior royal to appear open while remaining entirely protected. It was supposed to be controlled. Measured. Another brick in the wall of the carefully managed image that William's team had been building and maintaining through years of relentless public pressure. For the first several minutes it was exactly that. William was composed, thoughtful. He spoke about duty, about the future of the monarchy, about his vision for what leadership could look like in a modern world. He was good at it. He has always been good at it. There is a reason people who watch him in interviews come away feeling like they have met someone they would genuinely want to know. He has an ease to him when he is on stable ground, a warmth that reads as completely unperformed. He leaned forward when he spoke. He smiled at the right moments. His voice had a steadiness to it that communicated confidence without arrogance. And then the interviewer shifted direction. The question was about Kate. About the personal toll of the last several years. About what it had cost not just the institution but the man himself, the husband, the father, to navigate everything that had been thrown at his family. Something changed. Watch the moment carefully. Watch his eyes first. There is a flicker, brief, almost imperceptible, of something moving across his face that he does not entirely manage to catch before it lands. His chin drops slightly. Not dramatically, just enough. His voice, when he begins to speak, carries a different texture than it had 30 seconds before. Lower, slower, like a man choosing each word with the awareness that some words, once spoken, cannot be retrieved. He started talking about Kate, about what she had endured, about the grace she had shown through something that would have leveled most people. And as he spoke, his composure, that remarkable steel-reinforced composure that had held through 6 years of public attacks, began to develop very small, very human cracks at the edges. Then came the line. He said he would no longer allow his family to be made into collateral damage in a transatlantic PR campaign. The room went still. Not the kind of still that happens when someone says something awkward. The kind of still that happens when someone says something true. The kind of still that settles into a space and stays there because everyone present understands instinctively that they have just witnessed something that cannot be walked back. He was not reading from notes. There were no notes. He was not reciting a prepared statement. His communications team had not approved that sentence. There was no version of those words that had been run through the careful machinery of palace media management, because if it had been, it would never have survived. What came out of William's mouth in that moment came from somewhere that no publicity team has access to. Came from 6 years of watching, 6 years of absorbing, 6 years of choosing dignity over retaliation, over and over again, until the cost of that choice finally outweighed the benefit of silence. The clip leaked before the documentary aired. Nobody has officially confirmed how, but within hours it was everywhere. Shared by royal commentators, by entertainment journalists, by people who had never once clicked on a royal family headline in their lives but found themselves stopping mid-scroll because something about this felt different. Something about this felt real. The phrase collateral damage trended globally. Late-night hosts referenced it. Political analysts referenced it. The clip accumulated millions of views in the time it takes most people to eat breakfast. And then Meghan responded. Not with words. Not with a statement. Not with anything that could be directly quoted or directly attributed as a response. But with a move so familiar to anyone who has been paying attention that it required no explanation. Within 48 hours of William's clip dominating the global conversation, Meghan appeared on social media. Polished, composed, filmed in the warm, curated aesthetic that has become her signature. She was not addressing the clip directly. She would never address it directly. That is not how this particular game is played. Instead, she inserted herself into the narrative the only way she knows how. By making sure the camera was on her. This is a pattern. And it is important to name it clearly because it did not start with the documentary response. It started long before that. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. When William's warm, unscripted heart breakfast interview went viral, the one where he spoke about his grandmother's method of putting clotted cream on a scone, the one where he was so genuinely, effortlessly charming that the internet fell a little bit in love with him all over again, Meghan released a video within hours. Her own video, with her own product, with her own version of the exact same scone moment, positioned carefully in front of a camera she was very much aware was rolling. Don't forget about me. That is what the behavior communicates. Not in words, in timing, in precision, in the specific, deliberate choice to step into someone else's moment and redirect the light. When William erupted out of his seat at the Aston Villa Europa League final in Istanbul, genuinely, completely, beautifully lost in the joy of watching his team win. The footage spread because it was authentic. Nobody staged it. Nobody planned it. It was a man in a crowd, forgetting for one magnificent moment that half the world was watching him, and just being a football fan. When William was caught on someone's phone laughing with football podcasters he already followed online, reading their column the morning of the match, geeking out like a regular person who loves a sport, the clip spread because you cannot manufacture that kind of ease. Meghan's moments never look like that. At the Dodgers game, filmed in a darkened box, every glance toward the camera was just a half second too aware. Every reaction landed a half beat too considered. This is not speculation. This is observable. This is what the difference between performance and presence actually looks like when you place them side by side and study them carefully. One person forgets the camera exists. The other never forgets. And an audience, any audience, feels that difference in their gut before their brain has time to name it. William's confession broke through because it arrived from a place Meghan's carefully curated content never reaches. It arrived from truth. And the specific truth it arrived from, the one that made the clip hit the way it did, the one that made even people who had grown tired of royal drama stop and pay attention, was about Kate. Always, underneath everything, it came back to Kate. There is something that William said in a radio interview around the same period that deserves to be held up and examined carefully, because it reveals more about him than almost anything else he has said publicly in years. He was speaking about Catherine's return to public duties after her recovery, her trip to Italy, her first major public engagement since the cancer diagnosis. And when he spoke about it, his voice changed. Not dramatically, not in a way designed to elicit sympathy. In a way that was simply unmistakably honest. He said she had been through so much. He said their family could not cope without her. He said he was very, very proud. 3 words. Very, very proud. The repetition was not rhetorical flourish. It was not a speechwriter's technique. It was a man reaching for language and finding that ordinary language was not quite enough to hold what he was feeling. So he doubled the word. The way people do when they mean something more than the word itself can carry on its own. Watch his chin when he says it. It lifts slightly, not all the way, just enough to suggest a man who is holding something together, who has chosen to hold it together, who will keep holding it together because the alternative is not something he permits himself. And underneath that lifted chin, underneath that controlled voice, underneath every single carefully maintained inch of royal composure, there is a husband who sat in a hospital corridor and felt the specific, devastating fear of someone who has already lost one person they loved to a world that moved too fast and asked too much. He lost his mother at 15. He was not going to lose his wife. That fear does not produce anger. Not the hot, immediate kind. It produces something slower and more dangerous. It produces the kind of quiet, building resolve that accumulates over years until it finds a door and walks straight through it. And the door it walked through was a documentary camera, and an interviewer who asked the right question at exactly the right moment, and 6 years of stored truth that finally had somewhere to go. What William said in that clip was not just a condemnation of Meghan. It was a declaration. It was a man drawing a line in a very specific place and saying, clearly, without diplomatic softening, this far and no further. My family is not a narrative device. My wife's recovery is not a backdrop for someone else's content. My children are not supporting characters in a story they never agreed to be part of. Collateral damage. He chose that phrase deliberately. Whether he planned it or not, it arrived with the precision of something that had been forming for a long time. Collateral damage is the language of conflict. It describes people who are harmed not because they were the target but simply because they were nearby when something destructive was deployed. And William was telling the world, and perhaps one specific person in California, that he saw exactly what was happening, that he had always seen it, and that the seeing of it, for 6 years, had been its own particular kind of punishment. The world's response was not complicated. It was immediate. It was massive. And it was, by every measurable metric, on William's side. Not because people had been waiting to turn against Meghan. Not because the audience was looking for a reason to take sides. But because authenticity, when it finally appears after a long absence, is one of the most recognizable things in the world. People know it when they see it. They feel it before they can articulate it. And what they saw in that documentary clip was a man who had given up something, the safety of silence, the protection of saying nothing, because something more important than his own protection was at stake. His family, his wife, his children, who would one day be old enough to search their own names online and find everything that had been written and said and performed in the years before they were old enough to understand any of it. That is what William was protecting when he finally spoke. And here is the final thing. The thing that changes everything about how this story is understood. After the clip went viral. After the commentary exploded. After Meghan released her carefully timed counterpresence on social media, and it landed with a fraction of the impact of William's unscripted 30 seconds. Something shifted. Not in the headlines. Not in the commentary. Something quieter than that. People started paying attention to William differently. Not as a royal, not as a future king, as a person. As a man who had been through something genuinely difficult, who had carried it without asking anyone to notice, and who had finally, in one cracked and human moment, let the world see the cost of what he had been carrying. The football videos landed differently after that. The Sweet Caroline footage landed differently. The podcast fan encounter, the scone interview, the sight of him in Istanbul jumping out of his seat with pure unguarded joy, all of it recontextualized. All of it revealing the same thing from different angles. This is who he actually is. Not the stiff, ceremonial figure that royal coverage had sometimes reduced him to. Not the distant future king moving through carefully staged engagements with a practiced smile. A real person, with real grief, real love, real fury held quietly in reserve for 6 years until the moment it finally had to move. The most powerful thing William did was not break his silence. It was everything he revealed in the moment he finally did. And there is one more chapter to this story that has not been told yet. Sources close to the palace have indicated that the documentary contains a second moment, a quieter one, filmed in a different setting, that William's own team debated cutting from the final edit entirely. A moment that goes further than the collateral damage confession. A moment that names something specific. Something that, when it airs, royal commentators believe will make the first clip look like a warm-up. That moment has not been released yet, but it is coming. And when it does, nothing about the way this family's story is told will look quite the same as it did before. Make sure you are here when it drops, because the detail buried inside that second confession is the one that explains everything. Why William stayed silent as long as he did, what finally made silence impossible, and what he is prepared to do now that he has chosen to speak. You will not want to miss it.